Yes. So yeah, I've been with vision, so I was like getting ready for the day, so I was trying to yeah, he's been doing pretty good. Um I'm trying to figure out I want yeah, I think today will be good because I'm like wanting to figure out next steps and like how I can keep it interesting for him. I don't want it to get like monotonous for him. I do have a question about like okay, so one thing I'm struggling with is I know you've said like, oh, try to kind of stand still when you do your cue and while you click, and that we're supposed to obviously kind of be in the middle. The thing I'm having a hard time with is like getting to the like just the physical like aspect of like getting to the cones in time to give him a treat and then get back and then do the cue all while standing still. Like I feel like I can't
It
get
is a
everywhere
lot.
fast enough to be still and move and catch up with him.
It is. I know it's a lot. That's where it's good to split it up in different parts and train different parts because we do not only have to train our horses but also ourselves. And like
Yeah.
especially for me as like with outside eyes, it's easy to see, and also with the experience that I have, it's easy to see where certain behaviors as trainers can lead to undesired results in the future. Because
Uh-huh.
if we always walk, that becomes part of the cue. Uh,
Right.
well, it's not 100% certain, but horses do pay attention to their environment so that they can predict if there's a click and a treat coming. If they want to pay attention to everything. So yeah, when you're not moving, they're not moving because like in the past, it meant like follow the person. If they move, you have a
Yeah.
pretty good chance of being
And I
reinforced.
guess part of it is he'll like so he is starting, I think, to recognize my cue because I've been trying to ask him. I've been saying "whoa" randomly. I'll kind of have him stop because he was just seeing the cones as the cue, and so if
Yeah,
the cones are out and I was in the middle, he would just start doing it, and he didn't want to stop. So that's why I started doing "whoa" because I wanted him to start knowing, like, no, when I point, then that's
and
when you
that's
go.
also really good to realize. Like when you're focusing on one cue, it is normal that other cues become a little less temporarily unless
Yeah.
you spend time on that. And for you, I think this is the perfect time to um, say, hey, we also have whoa cues. And it's true, the cones become the cue in the beginning because
Hmm.
anything in the environment will become a cue. I
Right.
call it a working cue. It's like the cue the horse picks in order
Yeah.
to predict what's coming. Like traditionally trained horses, oh, they see a halter in the pasture, they're gone. If I don't
Right.
come with a halter, yeah, my horse let me approach him. It's so weird. Yeah, that's because the horse learned that something in the
Right.
environment, the halter predicted something, and he responds to that something. So
Right.
the cones, that's why I like to use four cones because they are the corners. It makes it a very clear for the horse also where to take a turn and so on. So deliberately, that's the environmental cues you put in the environment to give your horse
Right.
clarity. And then when they do it, you can choose either to, if you just want to do movement training, you put those four cones and they will go, 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 go. But if you want to take it to the next step and then say, like, I want you to walk now, I want you to trot now, I want you to stop,
Right.
then you reinforce your previous trained cues and also the cues of walk. So then the horse starts, instead of paying only attention to the cue for the speed, he will pay attention to the cones for the direction and your
Right.
cues for the speed.
And I guess where that links back to my first question is so say for example, so say I have the cones out and I'm trying to stand still and be in the middle while I cue him. But if I go out of the circle to go give him his treat, and then by the time I go back to the middle, a lot of the time he'll start going again. If he sees me get back into the cones, he'll just start going again. but then that doesn't give me time. But then if I'm going to click in time and go give him the treat in time, then it doesn't give me time to be still and pointing. But I guess I could just stand still for a quick second while he's moving.
This
I
is
just don't want it, you know what I mean?
this is how I do it. I try really to be specific because like the last thing I want is me moving will become the cue because it will
Mm-hmm.
be annoying in so what I do, I stand still, I point, the moment the horse goes, then I'm allowed to walk because it's about that the horse doesn't see you moving as a cue. Basically, you
Right.
even want
So
to,
it's okay even if he's moving first.
yeah, he's
Okay.
moving for like you stand still, he moves, then you can move. And you can move
Okay.
anywhere you want. That's not really that important. If your horse starts to rely on that in a way that we don't want it, in other words, if they pick a working cue that we don't want him to pick as a
Right.
cue, then we change it and we just change by reinforcing what we want.
Right.
So basically,
Okay.
so let me just break it up for you. You stand still, you cue walk, your horse walks, then you walk to the middle.
Right.
Uh, and then you um, you can even it depends on what, yeah, and then you can just click and go to the other side. But it's really important because later on, when you train for duration, like multiple laps and so on,
Right.
then you want to stay in the middle and just point. I do walk a little bit in the middle because I have to turn, because I have to cue. So I
Right.
walk my little, but it's not that me walking is the cue because I really don't want that. I'm just like yeah, I try to make it
Right.
like a little bit harder for myself at first, but it will pay off in the end because then
Yeah.
in the end, it doesn't matter if you move or not move. So even if you would sit on a chair, you could just point and it would be the same. So because he's not paying attention to you moving. So then, and then when you want to be arriving at the cue, at the cone to give a treat before he does, that's where the rectangle comes in handy because there are certain cones that you can reach before he reaches it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the diagonal cone. Let me see if I can make a whiteboard and
Yeah. I remember seeing that in the kind of talking about that last week too. I guess part of what was making me feel unsure is that traditionally or like usually we you want to cue before the behavior, you know? And my being still and pointing is not happening before the walking. And so I think that's what I was feeling confused about is that like I know usually a cue, we're supposed to do the cue before the behavior happens, but in my case, it's kind of happening like when he's already started walking. And so I didn't know if that
such a good
was,
point. Let's stop there
yeah.
and do that before other things come also in there because I really want to answer this question because it's such an important point that you point out. You say the traditional cue starts before the behavior.
Usually it's like, okay, we do a cue and then that's the
Okay, let me
signal for them to
point
do the behavior.
out
Yeah.
the difference in my how I define cues. A cue is a question. Um, a command is an you have to do this or else an aversive comes. In traditional training, you use pressure release, which
Oh, and
means
yeah, I
that,
didn't mean traditional as in traditional training. Sorry. I
okay,
just meant like
well,
usually.
but let
Usually in
me
like
still
positive
explain
reinforcement. Yeah.
this because I think it is part of what we expect in when we switch more over to positive reinforcement. So in traditional training, for instance, I don't know if you have done any Pirelli, which waving the your
I mean, I know what it is,
finger,
but I
then
never
wiggling
do
the
it.
rope, then wiggling your arm, and then in the meanwhile, the whole that musketon thing just does this, and your horse will lift
Hmm.
his head and back up, and then oh, it will leave. So that cue is not a cue; it's a command. It's an if
Right.
you don't back up with phase one, I will accumulate the aversive into phase two, phase three until you do. what I
Right.
want you to do. So the phase one is not a cue, but is a predictor of a threat that will become reality. It's a
Right.
predictor of the aversive. So in traditional training, we are taught that you start with that. In positive reinforcement, first of all, you don't want to create poisoned cues. So you train the behavior first by manipulating the environment instead of manipulating your horse. And then you add a cue. And then you pair the cue with the behavior. In the meanwhile, before you are teaching your horse a cue, your horse is looking for information about what behavior gives him the best chances of an appetitive. So, oh, cones, oh, that means running. Like, that's what we want.
Right.
So once they are moving forward, then we pair our cue with the behavior. So the moment he starts to walk because he knows the repertoire, we have eaten our treat, and now when I start walking again, offering behavior, that will uh, lead to a click and a cue. So that moment you start pairing it when the behavior is happening, and then when you have done that a few repetitions, it depends on the horse and whatever, everything else, it depends. When your horse starts to pay attention, then you can say, okay, I move the cue a little bit before he moves. And because the whole setup is still the same, and he's standing, he's eating, he's standing, and you point to a cue and he walks, immediately click treat for responding to the cue. And then temporarily it's about the cue, and it's not about like, oh, I want you to go to the other cone. Just responding with movement on you pointing, or you say walk on. That will be
Right.
like, and then you build up that duration in the walk, and then so that's how you create predictability. So, yeah, so that's super important. So
So basically, just don't worry about moving it forward in front of it yet.
no, because the thing is, the horse picks his cues in
Right.
whenever we train, and then we as a trainer, um in positive reinforcement, we as a trainer then say, okay, now you know the behavior, now I'm adding a cue. And then we fade out also the reinforcement schedule that I'm going to talk about today, so that the behavior becomes stronger. I will talk about that because I will talk about having a system in positive reinforcement. And I realized that I might have skipped that part, but having a visual about what to do in what phase of the training is helpful. So, so like when you have cones, let's make them a nice color. Where's my color? Oh, here's my color. Make them orange. Yeah. Anyway, so oh yeah, I did participate. So you can you can color too. Anyway, so
Oh, cool.
yeah. Uh, oh. So this is the rectangle.
And honestly,
So
I think some of the walking to the cones, in some ways, some of it will get a little easier for me to get to the middle and stuff once I can make it a little bigger. Right now, he making the distance bigger is a little hard for him, so I'm going taking it slow with making the distance bigger. So I think once the length is bigger, I think that will also make it a little easier for me to get to the middle for some of the parts.
yeah, so what I found handy, if I'm staying here and I see my horse is about here. He has to go around this and here. So for me,
Mhm.
when I click here, I will be presenting with my hand, beep, 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 that's my
Yeah.
hand there. and then when he walks on to that one, it's probably about between this one and this one, the short sides that I click, and then I will be presenting. This is my little hand as
Hmm.
a treat. Then I present it there. So therefore, the rectangle can be very useful because there are some points in the rectangle that you can reach the cone before your horse, and it's usually the opposite cone because the distance between those are a little bit longer than these ones.
Hmm. Okay.
But you have, it also depends on your horse. Like Fionn is really fast, he just runs, so I have to go all the way there. But maybe for your horse, when you click him here, you can be already at that cone. So you
Yeah, and
have
that's
to
what I've
kind
been
of figure
doing.
out,
Yeah.
it depends on how big is your horse, how big is your setup, how fast moves your horse, because you really want at that point that you click um, for walking, and then that you present consistently at the next cone, preferably.
Hmm. Yeah.
Or if that doesn't happen, then the cone next to it. But if you're already standing there with your buffet, like here it is, and
Hmm.
that becomes very clear because then you can create movement after the click. And
Yep. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what we've been doing. We've been doing the click at the one and then feed at the next one.
yeah,
And I'm trying to for right now be consistent with like making sure I'm doing it at the next one because I think for a minute I kind of started doing it a little bit more variably. Like there were a couple times I'd click in between the like or click and I'd feed him. Say if he like did something good, like walk towards the outside or something, I would click for a random spot. Um, for something else and I would try to feed him there. But then he started getting, I think that made him, from what I can tell, that seems like it made him a little bit, gave less clarity. So then I tried to be like, okay, no, just feeding at the cones. Even if he does something good in between, I'm going to still just feed at the cone.
and the advantage
Um,
of feeding at the cone is that they will start going to the cone and wait there.
right.
And if your horse is very fast, that will help. But if your horse is very slow, he keeps on moving. So that can
Yeah.
also be helpful. So yeah, here is where it's like, this is the principle. You give him clarity by clicking for movements, and then shifting, like, shifting the criteria, but then still give him clarity about where to expect the treat. And if you do that consistently, he will never come inside the rectangle because you're always feeding outside, outside, outside. And speaking about outside, I made that snapshot of your video
Oh, yes,
about
yes.
feeding, that he was just looking inside and he was already crossed his leg. So it was so good. At that point in the video, I did not expect that. You walked to outside the rectangle and there was a feeding pen where you fed him, which was so good. But at the end of the video, he came into the rectangle, and I did expect that to happen because when you feed him consistently with his neck bent, they will just follow where the head is. So if their
Right.
neck is already in a bend, even if it's slightly, it happened to Patricia too. If you look at those videos, it's very helpful to look at like what happens, how we're feeding. So if we're feeding with a straight neck, that's why I want you to present where you want him to be with his head.
Yeah.
Or if he comes in consistently, even feed him a little bit with his neck bend outwards. We will correct that later because it's not the correct bend, and so on. But
Right.
it's to prevent, if you do consistently teach him to look at the inside, that's where he will go, because they will anticipate on where the treat is. And if the treat goes slowly but surely into the rectangle, they just anticipate, oh, let's go there because that's where I expect the treat. So realizing that feeding for position is so important because we are training the behavior in that moment by reinforcing the behavior, what he's doing with a treat. So if we lure him to look at the inside and come at the inside, or do the opposite for the outside,
Right. Yeah, I've
that
been
will
trying to feed him
influence
more
their
straight.
behavior.
For a while, I was trying to feed him like really physically close to the cone, which I think is probably why he was coming because I was trying to put my hand right by it because I really wanted him to see like, oh look, it's right at the cone. And so then I think I was doing it too close I was trying to do it at the cone instead of going out, but now I've been, since you said that, trying to go back
And you
out.
don't have
And
to feed at the cone with his head
yeah,
because you don't want to teach him to touch the cone.
right.
So that doesn't matter, but he still will see it and he will still,
Okay.
yeah, walk around it. Like, yeah,
Right, right.
most horses walk around it. I have not yet come. Yeah, well, I did have like horses that were just ignoring the cone, just stumbling
Yeah, yeah.
over them, and then it's like, this is okay, right? No, feed him for position to the outside. He has to learn to walk around the cone and not touch the cone at all. So that
Yeah.
was so yeah, that's but if we like are unconscious of our own behavior, then we don't realize that sometimes we reinforce behaviors that
Yeah.
we just don't intend. Yeah,
Maybe I've
next
just been
question.
worrying a little
Oh
too
yeah.
much. Maybe I've been worrying just a little bit too much about like because it's like I'm walking, a couple steps out of the circle to give him the treat, and then I'm like, oh, then I have to walk back in and be in the middle and hold something, and then I'm trying. So I think I was worrying a little bit too much about my position, which maybe it
Okay,
doesn't
what you
matter
can
as
do then,
much.
sorry to interrupt, but otherwise I forget.
Mhm.
So you're feeding him like outside the cone. So what you
Yeah.
can do is cue him to walk while you're standing. When he's walking, you will be walking to the middle, and then you can
Oh,
build the
okay.
duration.
So I can
Um,
cue him I should cue him while I'm outside of the
yeah,
cones. Oh,
it
okay. I
doesn't
thought I had to
matter.
be in the middle.
No, you don't have to be in the middle, but that will you will shape that eventually
Okay.
because when you're building duration, when he's doing like 2 or 3 or 4 laps for one click, where will you be? You will be in the middle.
Got it.
But
Okay. So don't worry
once
about
he,
that right now.
yeah, yeah, I think more important is that we stand still and cue like
Okay.
with pointing. I found pointing easy because it's so human. I know
Right.
horses have no idea like what we are pointing at. I found dogs, if you point, the dog will look at where your finger is. Horses,
Hmm.
they interpreted the whole pointing different and they figure out arm movement cone. Let's guess. Oh,
Yeah.
guess right. Oh, arm movement cone, let's guess. And when you start pointing at other objects, they will just generalize and guess. Oh, there's another object. Should I go around it? Oh, click treat. Oh, and then they start also, so they start to connect. So basically your cue will be an object together with your arm movement. And if you
Yeah.
would, you can also take it one step further. And then I've done that with Kira too, just to experiment. Like, can I fade out the cones and just point and then click her for moving away from me? And that worked too. But if like in at Liberty work as an exercise, she came closer and then I had to point and then she went further and then she came in, and because like me wanting her to keep that certain distance of about 10, 15, 20 meters, that's a concept they don't really get, I think. So that's really, I think you can train everything. But so therefore I kept having objects, and there were always like jumping standards or tires or whatever. So I just started to point around objects and she generalized, oh, there's an object, and you could see the moment she saw it, oh, let's go around it. And that made it really easy. So therefore, um, I think using an object part of the cue, like this is just part of the setup.
Right.
Like, yeah, in traditional training, you have your whip, you have your lunge line. If you're really rich and lucky, you have a round pen. But those are all environmental cues too.
Right.
And
Okay.
and and,
So for
and
now, oh, sorry.
yeah, go.
I would say so for now, what I'll do is like I'll walk outside to feed him, and then I'll stand still there to do my cue. Even if he starts walking first, it's okay. But I think it'll help because I think I can cue him even before he starts walking if I'm out there. I think part of the problem was I was like, I got to get back in the middle because I'm supposed to be in the middle. So I'll stand out there, cue him while I'm standing still, and then while he's walking, I'll walk backwards to the back to the middle.
And if
And
you
then,
really want to, if it's important to you that he stands still and wait until you're in the middle and then cue, you could make a shaping plan to do that. Like at
right,
first, you stand still, cue him while you are maybe standing outside of the rectangle, and then like you feed him, you tell him, whoa, click treat for
right,
standing still, click treat for standing still, click treat for standing still. You do one step through the middle, click treat, come back,
right. I've been
feed for
thinking about
standing
that, but I might
still.
wait. Yeah, because the main reason I kind of wanted to do that was for like stimulus control almost, because I could tell he was just like, oh, cones are here, I'm just gonna keep walking. And then like he wouldn't want to stop. If I wanted him to stop, he like was like, no, I gotta keep going. So I kind of wanted to help him like
Yeah.
be like, it's okay, you can get treats for doing something else. And then I'll ask, but maybe I'll just kind of slowly keep that add that in. But I don't want that to be the
And
I
make
don't want
it
the
fun
stopping.
because if you have like multiple behaviors that you click and treat for, then you avoid that it will become boring for him, what you said in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
beginning. Because basically, so you can vary with the clicks and treats, like
yeah,
the reward schedule, but you can also vary with the treats. So in that sense, it unless you are 100% predictable, it doesn't become boring very easily because horses are we are lucky to train horses because they are just meant to eat 16 hours, so they will never run
right.
out of hunger and interest for food. But we can be too predictable and say, oh, the carrot again, after 10 chocolate cupcakes in one day, the 10th doesn't is not as good as the first one.
Right, right.
That can happen to horses too. So if you say, okay, here's a lower value treat, and here's something else, and once in the 5 clicks, I will give you something else completely at random or whatever. At
Mm.
random is such a doesn't even exist anyway, but
I know
more
what you mean though.
unpredictable.
Yeah,
If you count 5, maybe your horse cannot count, like, okay, this is the 5th click in the training, so now I get the carrot. But then you can also experiment with that, because
yeah,
what I want people to understand is, here's the principles. This is what you're teaching your horse. Your horse will pick an environmental cue just to be in control of his environment. Oh, there's a bush that's shaking. Maybe it's the lion, and I'll just anticipate on that, or the predator, and I'll just run the other
right.
way. Like, yeah. So they don't wait until they see actually a predator. If there's something that can predict a predator is coming, they will react. And that's the same. Like, they want to, like every living being, like be in control of their
Right.
environment. So if they see like, oh, cones, let's start running, because there's always like forward movement reinforced when I saw the cones. But if you can,
Yeah,
and even this is for people that are like in a different situation with different horse, different reinforcement history. Some horses haven't learned to stand still. So then you say, I'm training standing still in a completely different context first, to focus on that, and then I combine it with bringing it into the at liberty rectangle, and then mixing it. So then it's forward movement, whoa, forward movement, whoa, forward movement, whoa.
hmm,
Um, because in the end, we want the cue to be the predictor of the possibility of being reinforced. And the
right,
reinforcer doesn't have to be a click. The reinforcer then, when the behavior is trained, doesn't have to be a treat. The reinforcer can also be other behavior.
right.
And then you can build a chain of behaviors.
Cool. Thanks for the clarification. I think, like I said, I think I was probably thinking too much about like me needing to be in the middle or whatever. And so now that's helpful to be like, no, it's okay. I can do it while I'm outside. Cause I was just moving so much. Cause I'm like, I gotta get to all these spots.
And then
So
you start running, and then your horse will anticipate, oh, she's running to the next cone, let's go there, because that
yeah.
will become a cue, and then you are in like, so I really want everybody who is watching the replay also to think, what do I want my cue to be? I found it that I become the bottleneck if me moving. And the speed at which I am moving is the cue. And that's what you see so much in the reverse round pen. It's a fantastic exercise, but I do think that people have to not stay there with their moving target, because that's what you see. You see people running and then the horse trots, but the horse doesn't trot on their own. The horse doesn't offer the behavior because the moving target or the moving trainer is their cue. The moment the trainer's, the horse stops. And then it's like, oh yeah, oh, you did so well. Let's reinforce my horse. Good job. And they don't realize how they are training their horse to stop when they are stopping. So then we become the bottleneck, because eventually they have more stamina and more legs than we have. Even my little ponies outrun me.
Mm-hmm.
They have more duration, more stamina, more speed than I have. It's hard, but yeah, that is the truth. So I have to be like a little bit smarter and let them do the work. But yeah, so therefore the principle is pay attention to your cue. What would happen if you would always move? Could that be become part of the cue? And the answer is yes. Maybe not in all cases with all horses, like 100% of the cases, but what I've seen generally, yes, we become the cue. We don't realize that, and that's where we struggle with at Liberty. It's the same as at Liberty with Pirelli. You have like a training stick to threaten your horse. Aversive is coming. If you stop, aversive is coming. So that means that if you don't have your stick, which is the threat, the horse doesn't want to move as willingly forward because, ooh, the threat is gone. And then they don't do it. So yeah, it's really important to put ourselves in a horse's shoes and see, like, how does he understand the world the way I present it to him. And sometimes we don't realize it, but yeah, if people say like, yeah, I'm carrying a whip when I'm riding, but I'm not using it, then my question is, if you're really not using it and it's useless in training, why carry it? Because it's only more in your hand. It's only an extra thing. And then they realize, yeah, when I don't have a whip when I ride, the first time maybe okay, but the second ride, the third ride, my horse will act differently. He's not that forward. That's because that whip is a part of the behavior. It's so without that, and the horses realize quickly, oh, there's not like an aversive coming.
Mm-hmm.
Or you start using another aversive, and that's why when people change from whips to spurs. So yeah, it's all about like, what do you want? And then the spurs or the whip also become a crutch, because without that, you don't get the behavior you want. And what I like about positive reinforcement, but that's my personal thing, is like, I like to train my horses with as little tools as possible. Because if I don't have a whip, if I don't have a rope, if I don't have a clicker, if I don't have a carrot, I still want my horse to do what I ask. And they will with positive reinforcement. With negative reinforcement, oh, you didn't bring your stick, bye. You didn't bring your halter, I won't, halter, I won't come, you know? So,
Mm-hmm.
so because I don't want people to be really dependable on training tools, because in the end it's about the connection and the communication, and it's just, yeah, it's good to not, because what if one day you forget your target stick and your horse doesn't want to come because there's no target stick, or it breaks or whatever, or your horse just escapes and you don't have a target stick. It's fabulous. Well, maybe you have your hand and a hand target. Great. you know. So yeah. Anyway, that's my that's and I just have high standards for myself, and I just like to experiment what behaviors that I can all train. And I'm super curious about, like, I was curious when I started this, like, can I teach my horse to move when I wasn't moving? And I'm like, oh, hey, I can, by shaping, by giving clarity with clicks and treats. Oh, that's amazing. So today I want to take a little bit of time to talk about a positive reinforcement training system, because I believe, well, my personal experience is that when I have a system, I got clarity about what to do, when to do it, what order sometimes to do it. And that's just was helpful to me. So that's when I started to think about what is important in positive reinforcement training and how can I make a system out of that. Oh, and my stop share. My presentations. Yeah, okay. My presentation just froze. Let's see. So my system is based on 6 key lessons for horses and 6 keys to success for trainers. And today I want to talk about the keys to success for trainers. There are 6 keys. One is a training plan. A training plan in my system is a vision board for your horse. It's really good to think about all the things you would like to do with your horses, all the goals you have. And then you can also make, like, okay, a vision board for movement training. What do I do? How do I envision movement training? Because movement training can be at Liberty Rectangle. Movement training can be hand walks, but then with positive reinforcement. It can be long range. It can be driving your horse. It can be riding. It can be so many things. So it's good to think about, like, what kind of movement do you need in order to accomplish the goals that you have for you and your horse. Can be fun goals like trail riding, but it could also be potentially like, okay, I want my horse to be healthy and he needs to lose weight, or I need to manage metabolic syndrome or laminitis, or so put that into that perspective. So if I say training plan, I actually mean vision board, and it's all the behaviors that you want to train, or all the behaviors that you want to train for a specific goal, like movement training. Then when you have that, you make a shaping plan. How do you get to that specific goal? So the shaping plan is a tool to accomplish your goal behaviors. I really want people to know the principles of learning and motivation. So just what we talked about today, I don't care what cue people pick for their horses, but the principle is pick a cue that will support your future goal. Pick a cue that is gives clarity, but also pick a cue that is clear for us. If I have to remember to say peanut butter when I'm seeing my horse in order to let him trot, for me, the word trot, or the Dutch word, is easier to remember. Just like what we talked about, the pointing, it's so human-like. So therefore, I like to do an easy cue, but then I have to remember, like, what is my learner? How is he experience the world? Well, horses do not really pay attention to that. I think cats and dogs, but especially dogs, are way better on interpreting, like pointing. Like usually if you point, you see the horse is like, oh, is there a treat there? It's like just not. So the principle of learning and motivation is like the learning quadrant. What is positive reinforcement? What is negative reinforcement? What is reinforcement? What is punishment? And also motivation. What is motivating your learner? And what is motivating you? How can we all incorporate that in training? So therefore, I rather talk about the principles than giving you rules like, okay, you have to reinforce this behavior 3 times and then you can raise your criteria. I rather have you to think about like, okay, when can I raise my criteria? Oh, when my horse is consistently offering the desired behavior that I'm asking, so that I know he really understands it. And for some horses, maybe the repetition is 3. Some horses need 5 times repetition. If you stay too long, then the horse thinks, but this is it. Why are you changing the rules suddenly? So the answer usually is it depends, because I work with principles and I really want people to understand the principle. Okay, for my horse, this is motivating. For my other horse, that is motivating. And instead of like, okay, when you use clicker training, you always need to have a carrot. No, you don't always need a carrot. So how does it apply to you? The fourth one is accountability. Being in a group like this is really helpful because it kind of forces you to do things. Like I have like such a, the accountability for me was such an eye opener when I started practicing with positive reinforcement. It was like when I was 2005, I really became really serious about that, in that time. And I had a friend and we were in an Andalusian show team together, but our horses were too young. So we were preparing our horses at home in order for, training plan was like, okay, in the future, we will do demonstrations. We will ride our horses in front of an audience and we will make a show out of it and we can, whatever, educate people or entertain people or whatever. So we had an accountability. Every 2 weeks we came together, and then 1 week it was in at my boarding facility, and like 2 weeks later at her place. And we had made a training plan. We had made a vision board. Okay, where are our horses? We had horses of 2 years old and 1 year old. My horse was 1 year old. So what do we want to do? I want to, yeah, do long rein and dressage demonstrations. So it was a long way from just having my horse tamed to riding my horse. But that accountability was like, we picked one little goal. How do we start? We probably want to start to get our horses acquaintance to traveling and audiences. So probably the first shows will be like something easy that a 1 year old or 2 year old or 3 year old horse can do, which would be trick training. So, but I was so scared of, we made kind of a shaping plan, not as detailed as I do them now, but we talked about it, like what can we do, and just reflecting would really help us to think about a shaping plan. And then the first week I did nothing. I was like petrified. What if it doesn't work? What if I fail? Blah, 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 all in my head. And then the second week it was, oh, in 6 days she will be coming to my barn and I have to present something. And then I was just frozen by fear of failure. So usually only the last 3 days before she would came, and she would just not came to judge me or give me points or whatever. She would be there to help me improve, but I didn't realize that. So only the last 3 days, click treat, okay. And then in 3 days I had like kind of the beginning of teaching Kira to pick up an object, and then together we would work on it. So that accountability is that helped me move, because I knew I had to show her something, because otherwise I would waste her time when I wouldn't have done anything. That's how I felt it. So I had like a bi-weekly accountability. Later on, I started doing things weekly, just like in old-fashioned weekly riding lessons, which is also basically accountability, because on Monday you go to the riding school because you know you have a lesson. So that accountability will really move you forward. And some people have really strong internal accountability and they can just put it in their calendar. Okay, on Wednesday I'm going to train no matter what. If it's snowing or raining or whatever, I will be doing something. And some people like to have like what I call external accountability. I have a little bit of both, depending on the goal that I have. So accountability is yeah, taking the responsibility for the training that you have laid out for yourself and your horse. If you say like, I want my horse to trot around 4 cones, if you don't do anything, if you don't train, if you don't practice, you don't get feedback, and you won't get to train that behavior. So yeah, accountability really helps. So that's really, and that's what I see in so many trainers and also in myself, like, oh, you have new behavior, it's really cool, you are so enthusiastic, you want to practice every day, and then it fizzles out. Usually it fizzles out because we get stuck somewhere. That's why having a system is so valuable. So accountability is usually a big part, and then a training journal, not only to track your training, but also as a tool to improve your training. The training journal, that it's also in the course, but I haven't really explained how it worked. But basically the training journal is that every session, so if you do multiple sessions, it's good to in the beginning to do that after each session. Okay, you train 3 minutes, you go to your training journal, then you do another session, you do it again. The only thing that I want people to track down is like the date, and before, in the beginning of the journal, like, what is your goal behavior, and then after each session focus on the things that went well, and then one thing that you want to improve on. So your failure, the learning point. I like to call it a learning point, because when you focus on your learning point, okay, my learning point is that I can stand still and cue my horse and then walk to the middle. If you write that down, it's really good in your brain. It really, you know what to do just by writing it down. Even if you have your training journal at home or in the car, it really helps to write things down. And if you do that consistently, it's so beautiful. Just I always encourage everybody to do this for, set a goal, 4 weeks. 4 weeks, I will just track every training. And that's also why I asked you all in the beginning to make a baseline video, because the baseline video will also help you with your motivation, principles of motivation. What are we motivated by? Success. If we see that we improve, it's good to keep going. So in a training journal, I always want to focus more on the good things, what went well, because that will teach you your strengths as a trainer. I was very patient today, I fed for position this day, and then you realize, oh, I'm doing also a lot of things right. So you don't have to do 3 things, but I do encourage people to have like consistently more things that went well than the learning points, because if you have like 5 learning points for your next session, that won't bring you anything, because it will be too much. So just like how you shape your horse's behavior, how you split that up, I want to split that up for yourself and say, okay, the next session I will be only focusing on the timing of my click, or the next session I will be only be focusing on presenting the treat, because it takes so long before I have it out of my pocket, and it would really benefit my horse if I could do click treat a little bit faster, something like that. So if you focus on one thing, it really gives you one thing to focus on. Don't worry about the rest for now. And then you focus on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and then all those things improve. And then if you look back in about like 4 weeks and read what you've done, you will notice like, wow, I did that. Oh yeah, that learning point, that was really a struggle, the timing. I cannot remember. I forgot about that. That was really a struggle or something. And that makes you realize where you how you have grown in training, and that will help you with your own learning and motivation. And then the sixth one is emotions in training. I put a little angry face of Kira here because emotions, I believe that we are partly responsible for, first of all, we are responsible for our own emotions because we can choose. And I do believe, because we are our horse's guardians, that we are also responsible partly for a horse's behavior. If a horse is angry or frustrated or learned helplessness or don't care all the time in training, it's because something we do. If a horse is happy, engaged, and learning, it's also because we did something. And that's what I like in positive reinforcement training, because the aim is to make it a win-win. They get something they want, we get the behavior we want. And I think that's a fair trade-off. So emotions is also something that is really important to pay attention to. Hey, I saw tail swishing. Maybe you don't see it in the moment because you're focusing on giving the treat. Like I worked with a client of mine, and her horse was really frustrated in training. He was a gelding. He was always having his willy out. So we tried to keep his frustration down by offering more predictability. But there was, like, in the videos, that's so powerful of the videos, whenever she clicked or cued, the moment she clicked or cued anything, he was anticipating already with frustration by swishing his tail. It was clockwork. She cued walk on, tail would go just a little swish. And she never noticed that because she was always focused on his head. So when we started paying attention to his emotions and where they were building up, because then suddenly in a part of movement training, his willy would come out and would just not go back in. So that is like, oh, he's really over threshold. And some horses just maybe go to aggression. Some horses walk away. Geldings get over aroused because they are so in conflict. Like, I don't know what to do, and I really want that treat. So I think part of emotions of our horses is what we can influence in a big deal, and I think it's part of our responsibility for, at least for emotions like fear and frustration, to decrease them and keep them at a minimum, just to make it just more fun for our horses. So in a flow chart, it would say, like, training plan. All the underlined words are the keys to success for trainers. So training plan means that you start with the end in mind. For Kira, when she was wild and feral and unapproachable, it was like, okay, I had something like, let's start teaching her how to hold to her. So that was my end goal, besides all that show training that I had in mind. So I listed all the behaviors that were part of it. It was like an extended list. It was so fun to do with my friend, with my accountability. Like, okay, in order to yeah, just do shows with her in the future. Oh, I need to hold her, I need to groom her, I need to keep her healthy, yada yada yada. All those things, especially if you have a young horse, it's fun to do that one time. And then we have to plan. What do we decide what to train first with Kira? Okay, I want to do all these things like riding, but she's just very afraid of humans and unapproachable. So let's start with haltering. So that's what I decide. And then I made a shaping plan for that, and all based on the principles of learning and motivation. So, like, the purple colors are more like the things that are important in the background. So I made a shaping plan. Then I went to my horse to get some feedback. I showed her the halter, and she was like, a human, halter. So that was the feedback from Kira. So, like I said, I needed that accountability every 2 weeks from my friend, just to keep me going and to keep started, instead of thinking like, I don't know what to do, so I don't do anything at all. This really helped me. And then in a training journal, I evaluate. And training journal is also to I will change that because it's basically tracking your training. A tool to do that is your training journal. A tool to do that is making pictures. I made pictures of taming Kira, of all my goals in the first year. I turned them into a photo album. In January, I did this. In February, I did that. It was really motivating. And I did that for the second year too. And yeah, that's really cool to have. So track your training. Um, and evaluate. So also like feedback, like how did it go? Like, okay, my timing was off. So let's focus on timing. So for Kira, it was like, okay, haltering is just, yeah, not part of it. So then I had to adjust, and then I had to go back, like because of her emotions. Well, the heart represents the positive emotions, and positive desired behaviors, emotions, and the little lightning bolt is the negative emotion. So for Kira, she was so fearful. She was just over threshold in flight. So I had to adjust. So instead of haltering, I had to go back one step that I never thought of, because all the horses that I worked with before were approachable. I'm like, oh, I have to start approaching her first, because if I cannot approach her, I cannot never halter her. So those are the steps in which we learn. And with movement training, we start with the end in mind. Therefore, it's important to think about what is your goal in movement training, because I don't want your goal to be, oh, my horse walks around 4 cones. I want it to make this a tool in order to accomplish the goals that are motivating to you. And what that is, that's super proportional. For Kira, when she was overweight, had equine metabolic syndrome and laminitis, my motivation was not to send her around 4 cones. My motivation was to keep her healthy, to get her healthy, to let her lose weight, and to keep her healthy. So, and connecting your own motivation, your inner drive to your goal will help you get to that goal. Because otherwise, when you hit like a roadblock, like I didn't know how to put behaviors on cue. So I trained behaviors, didn't know how to put it on cue, started with another behavior, didn't know how to put it on cue. And then by the time I realized, because I did have a coach, that I did not know how to put behaviors on cue, I had trained more than 20 behaviors. None of them were on cue. My horse was pretty frustrated, always guessing, what do you want? What do you want? There was no cue. I was smart enough to recognize that he picked cues. Oh, when I stand in front of him, he knows how to do Spanish walk. So next time I was standing in front of him, which was not the safest place for Spanish walk, I discovered. And then the farrier came, and the farrier just walked in front of him, and my horse was like, maybe I got a treat for Spanish walk. So he kicked the farrier, which was pretty frightening, with his front legs, because my horse just was in like hopeful to get a click and a treat for Spanish walk because somebody was walking in front of him. I'm like, no, no, that's how they pick their cues. They will pick cues. Either it's convenient, safe, or not. So let's keep that, let's keep us in charge about that. So when you train a behavior, oh, yeah. So the last one is, so you either adjust, and you can also adjust from adjusting to your shaping plan. So sometimes you have to decide to train something else first. Like, okay, now you are in a part of your training that you want to implement the cues, and the cues that Vision already knows, the cue walk, but also the cue whoa, because you don't want the cones and you pointing be the only behavior that you can create in that setup, which is really, really smart to think about. So then you adjust your shaping plan. Shaping plans will always be adjusting because it's just a living document. So training a new behavior is basically your goal behavior. So maybe just implemented it in this situation. The goal at first is going around one object, because you want to teach your horse the behavior going around. So the next step is Oh, I think my a shaping plan. So once you have your shaping plan, you go practice. In practice, you get feedback and you have to ask yourself, do I get consistent behavior? Does my horse move around one cone, around two cones, anticipates on going to the next cone? You have all done that, Sarah. So like a lot of questions like going around one cone, your answer would be yes, consistent behavior. But in the beginning, the answer is no, not yet. So then you practice some more until your horse knows how to walk around one cone and so on. So then the behavior is consistent. So and then this is not in specific order, but one of the things when your horse offers consistent behavior in the behavior that you really want to train is that you start fading out your tools and your clicks. So yeah, your tools is your clicks, your tools is your target, not fading out the reinforcement completely. But then when you have consistent behavior, you can start adding cues, for instance, walk on or point at a cone. Once you have really that consistent behavior, you have to change your reinforcement schedule. In the beginning, every cone is clicked, and then every second cone is clicked maybe, and then maybe sometimes you go back every cone and then every third cone. But it is important to switch your reinforcement schedule, because in the beginning, when you shape the behavior, you need to click for everything that can lead towards the desired behavior. So your rate of reinforcement is pretty high, and it's basically 100% to intermittent. So then you start to click less and you get more behavior, because if you would be 100% predictable, your horse will decide the moment you cue him, walk on, he's like, no, I have to do 10 steps for 1 carrot. I have already had 10 carrots. I don't really desire a carrot anymore. So then your horse makes a decision based on predictability, and chances are that they opt out, and that's where it becomes kind of boring for them. But it's not really boring, because they have a choice, and they either can choose to engage in the behavior that you cue or opt out. And if they think it's not worth it, they opt out. So it's sometimes when they're not engaged, it's not because it's boring, it's because they have a choice. And they know what's coming, and then it's like, I'd rather do something that I want, and they wander off and go eat some weeds or grass or whatever, than staying engaged with you. So it's really important to change your reinforcement schedule once you have consistent behavior. So yeah, verbal cue. What to do first is principles of learning and motivation. Some horses, there's no strict steps in that, but these are steps. Like, yeah, when you are not getting consistent behavior, it has no use to put a cue on that behavior, because the horse doesn't really understand what to do yet. So once you get consistent behavior, and preferably when you already have it on cue, you don't need to, but that's fine. So there is kind of an order, but it's not like set in stone. Context shifts, maybe the place of the cone. Some horses get really upset if the cones are suddenly in another part of the arena or your training area. Or Fionn, he's like the one-trick pony with a fixed mindset. I know what to do, and then when I move the cones further apart, even though it's like was like half a step, he was like, "What's happening? This looks different. I don't know what to do anymore." So then I had to raise my rate of reinforcement. You can do it. It's the cone. It's still the cone. It's a little bit further away, but you can still do it. So yeah. So it could be that is a whole other context shift. Maybe having other horses in your training arena that can distract your horse from doing the listening to your cues and offering that behavior. Time of day can make an impact, if it, especially if your horses are on a tight schedule. If it's before feeding time, he might be different than after feeding time. Also, the weather has like lots of, we all know that the weather influences their behavior. For instance, if you do movement training, yeah, and it's stormy, they act different than it's like 30 degrees Celsius, very hot on a sunny day. So once we realize that all things that we change in training can be a context shift for them, we can practice context shift. And every time we practice a context shift, we have to realize that we have to lower our expectations and maybe also our criteria a little bit. It's the same for us when we can sing in the car or in the shower and we really enjoy it. If we put ourselves, or we are being put on a stage in front of 500 people and say, oh, now it's a TED talk or a TED song, go do your performance because I know you know the song. That's probably too big of a context shift. You probably want to practice in front of your family first to sing that song. You maybe want to just practice your dance a little bit too, instead of going from by yourself in the car singing that song to being on a stage. So that's, and those context shifts happen to horses too. It's like the whole environment is different. The cues that they picked in their environment may be not there suddenly, and that will influence their performance. So we really have to pay attention or be conscious about that. What is the context in which they have learned? Another thing that we do in training behaviors, duration. We have to build duration of that behavior. So I've put it like going to one cone, going to two cones, or a lap. But basically, the duration, you can also measure it in time or in distance. Like, okay, my horse walked 2 cones for 1 click, and now I'm building duration and I click every third cone. But you can also say, okay, I'll pay attention and I want my horse to walk for 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, and so on. So you can measure that in all kinds of ways. Distance is also a part of stimulus control, like the distance between the cones, the distance between you and the horse. Can you cue him to go to that cone from 4 meters away, from 6, from 10, from 20? Like, and you have to realize that that's a context shift, that you have to gradually shape that behavior. Then basically, after the consistent behavior happens, you can also think about behavior sequences. Maybe you want to trot, walk, trot, canter, trot, walk, and then do that all for 1 click. But it also depends on how consistent you are with that. And if your horse offers consistent behaviors, then you can also just raise the criteria from going around one object to more cones, a line, a rectangle, all the things that you have done already. And then basically, if you take into consideration in training all these things that I just talked about, like the reinforcement schedule, the context shift, duration of the behavior sequences, fading out your tools, then you will get to stimulus control. So your horse will has to generalize, okay, I have to pay attention to your specific cue, maybe the verbal cue, walk and pointing at the cone, and it's not the cone, because now there's no cone, but now there's a tire or a stone or another object, and I still have to do that. And also changing those things a little bit, so you can tell your horse, the verbal cue, the physical cue, my body cue will always stay the same. So that's where you can start practicing in different environments and setups. But again, when you do that, realize that you have lowered your criteria, raise your reinforcement rate for temporarily to give him more clarity, until they generalize, oh, walk is walk in whatever environment. Pointing is, I have to pay attention to one kind of an object and go around that, something like that. So having like a visual hopefully helps. So the order of the purple things are depending on your horse, like, yeah. But yeah, fading out tools would be after you have done it. It depends. Like for Odin, yeah, I do like to teach them my cues before I fade out the other cues, like the target stick, which was or my hand as a target, and then replace them by the cue that I want them to pay attention to. And yeah, then the context shifts comes later, but it also depends on the horse. Like I like to shift the context pretty quickly after a few training sessions already, and with other behaviors it's more beneficial to stay a little bit longer in that certain context of learning. But when we, and this is one of the principles, when we do realize that horses and humans learn in a certain context, we can help our horses by taking that into account in our training. Any questions?
I do have a question about if he makes a mistake. Obviously, I know that like if he cuts off a cone or something, I try the next time. I try to just make sure I'm clicking sooner and it kind of extra reinforce him going around that corner correctly. But in the actual moment, like if he starts to take a step in, kind of what I've been doing is I'll like kind of stop him a little, or I'll have him wait, and then I'll kind of just wait until, because he'll kind of usually, if I kind of wait and like he'll usually kind of then go back around the outside, like realize like, oh wait, I'm supposed to be on the outside, and he'll kind of correct himself if I kind of wait. But yeah, so it's like I know that like going forward, okay, yeah, I know I need to like just proactively make sure I'm clicking for while he's doing the right thing. But in the actual moment, what do you usually do? Do you have him kind of just wait and then kind of try to correct himself, or do you have him back up and
That's
like
what
what do you do?
I had, that exact same question because I did not know what to do, and I asked that. I forgot his name. It was the person that is also a dog trainer, um, and he did shows with his dog, and it was a long sequence of all so many behaviors. I don't know if I told you this example. Like the dog would come out, he had a date, there was a set table, then he had to open a door to let his friend in, who was the female with a bow, blah blah blah. And he said in training, whenever he skipped one of the behaviors that he trained, he would immediately, even if it was in a show, he would come out like his kind of hiding spot where the audience didn't see him, but from where he could cue the dogs. He would come out and say, like, this is what I want you to do. So when a horse skips a cone, what I now do, because I tried it out, like I tried both things out. It really set me back when I let it slide. When especially with Fionn, because he's more the fixed mindset. He's like, this is
Mm-hmm.
it, this is it. So the moment he skips a cone, he's like 3 cones out of 4. That's good, that's good. Because eventually, even if they skip a cone, you will click. And if your horse considered that a sequence of behaviors with one click, you can
Right.
have it in their memory. Oh, I have to go to cone number 2, 3, skip 4, and then go to 1. And
Right.
you don't realize, you're like, okay, now he's going on the outside, I reinforce that behavior. But to your horse, it's totally different story. He
Right. Or like to
interpreted.
him, he could be thinking like, oh, I get clicked for stepping. I need to be toward. It's like I don't know what he's thinking, but it could be like, oh, I need to get closer to her. I need to do. I don't know what he's thinking, but I don't want him to, yeah, get stuck on
Especially
it.
if you intentionally already have fed him, like with his nose inside the corner, then you already have reinforced it. And once he skips and then you click, he's like, amazing, I already thought that. I'm so smart. And you're like, oh, he skipped. He's not so smart because this was not, but I will click the next one because I want him to stay engaged. So what you would do, And I because I like to experiment just to get more um, experience. So I did let it slide and then click for the other one. It was so strong already. So I figured in my case, for Fiona it was already a secret, those behaviors. So then I remembered what like the advice was, like, okay, the moment you see that he's going to make a mistake, make sure that you can offer behavior that is desired. So the moment he comes in to skip that cone, whatever reason, then you see, oh, he's going to skip the cone, stop, and then feed for position so that he can do, like, even if you do it like very slowly, like, and I did that with Fionn, and I was afraid that he, because I'm always thinking, what am I training? Am I training him that he gets like 50 clicks at cone number 3 because he wanted to skip
Mhm.
that? But that's
Right.
not what they really do. Is that they pay attention to what they are reinforced for. Oh, I get so many clicks for going outside the cone and even making a wide bend, and then you lower your rate of reinforcement, so you get that intermittent reinforcement schedule at the for the behavior at that specific cone. So he will do more of like, but you wanted me to go outside, and then you say, yes, I wanted to do outside. And usually, well, what I have found, even with Fionn, who is like very tunnel vision and narrow minded, afraid to make mistakes, I only have to, if I see that he wanted to skip a cone, and I do like two, I'm paying really close attention to, I correct him by, okay, stop, we're going feeding for position, feeding for position, feeding for position, click treat, click treat, click treat, until you are around the cone. I did it twice and it never occurred again.
Yeah.
However, last a few weeks ago, I had somebody else train my horse, and she let it slide. So I saw exactly that same cone. He was skipping the cone. He was just like, I remember that I was reinforced for this. I will try this with my new trainer. And I recognized, because it was the cone in that specific spot, it was interesting to see. And then she did what everybody else would do, like, but I clicked him for going around the other cone, and he was like, okay. So I saw that he wanted to go to skip it again. So then I said, like, prevent it by stop when he's still doing the desired behavior, one cone before that, and then click and guide him, and then he didn't skip any more cones. So yeah, you have to kind of pattern interrupt.
Okay, so it is okay. So if I like stop him and then like wait for him to, because if I kind of like block him, stop him when he starts to do it, and wait, he'll, like I said, he'll usually himself kind of like go back step to the outside, and then I'll click him for stepping to the outside, and I'll click him for being like starting to go around it or whatever, and then I click him for going
If he
forward.
does that, if he kind of corrects himself, like, what, because basically he's thinking, what other options do I have? What other options were
Right.
reinforced positively in the past? And you can see that with Rachel's horse too. He does that too. He's like, whoa, okay, I have to go around. And if we can reinforce that thinking, which I like to reinforce that with a jackpot, because you
Mm-hmm.
really made them think. And like, I love it because you you chose the wrong behavior. Well, you chose behavior that I don't want to reinforce, and then you corrected yourself. And by them making that decision, them figuring it out, is so powerful,
Mm-hmm.
because then they really learn something. Because the moment that we see, oh, he's coming inside, I block him with my body, you prevent it. But if you
Right.
prevent like undesired behavior, as in coming in, if you present that, he will never learn what it is. So the moment you're not there to block him, he will skip, because he will just try out behaviors. And if we have reinforced that behavior in the past by clicking for the next cone and he thought it was a sequence, he wants to do the sequence of skipping and then getting a click. So
Right.
therefore, it's always better. So this is again one of the principles of learning, like what happens in learning, what happens in his mind. Could it be that it was like already a sequence? And oh, if that would be a sequence, then I know also that I can build on my own sequences, and maybe I can make like go click for 3 cones, you know. So it will give you feedback about how he's experiencing the training and what he's learning. But when they make that decision of like, oh, you stop him, huh, what options do I have? And sometimes because it is learning and it's so conscious making that decision, it can take a few seconds for before they respond, because they really have to think. And if they then go outside the cone, oh, I love that. And I would absolutely jackpot that. And then maybe do it one more time and then having a break and then maybe start another session or not. But like
Okay.
really let that sink in, like, oh, you made this decision and here's your birthday cake today. Like this is
Hmm.
really, yeah, amazing.
Okay, cool. That's good. That's good to know. That's kind of what I've been doing, but then I was like, I don't know if this is the best way to do that or not. So I wanted to check.
And the
But
feedback is always from your horse. Like there will be like, because like it's behavior is not set in stone, training is not set in stone. So therefore I will put my hand in the fire that this works until it doesn't work, until I come across a horse or a trainer or a combination that it doesn't work anymore, and I realize that. So therefore I really want you to think, what am I teaching him? Am I teaching him what I think I'm teaching him? Or am I teaching him something different? Well, if he keeps skipping cones, obviously we have reinforced that. Maybe we don't know how, but it's important to realize it's always an interaction. So if they do something that we not intended to do, the first question that I always advise people to ask themselves is, how have I reinforced this behavior? Like commonly, it's like a lot of undesired behaviors we have positively reinforced our horses to do, like door kicking. When I was like in a boarding facility, there was one Fjorden horse, he always kicked doors, but there were also metal bars. There was like a little low front, like about like, do you, well, think in feet, like 2 feet high or something. And then there were metal bars, so they put their heads and they through those metal bars, they were like this wide. So he started kicking that little front, and then if we didn't pay attention to him, he put his head through the bars and then one leg, and then he was kind of stuck. That would caught everybody's attention. Oh, the horse is stuck, let's help him. So he has learned ring the bell by kicking the door. Didn't usually somebody went over there, usually his owner, and shouted, "Stop it!" And then she was at that port, and then she was standing in front of his stall, and then we kept chatting, and he had what he wanted. And every time he thought, now it's my time for attention, he knocked, and she turned to him, gave him 100% attention. She thought she was punishing him, and she thought it would decrease his behavior. But I paid attention. I'm like, oh, it's actually increasing. So then we experimented, like what happened if we don't reinforce it anymore, and if we reinforce more behavior. What does he want? Obviously, he wants attention. Even if you're shouting, that's good enough for him. But what if? So then we experimented because I didn't know if it would work. It was my horse. So with a whole group of girls from the stable, we like, okay, if he's kicking his if we're talking, we have to pay attention that once in a while one of us goes to that horse and talk to him or pet him or just touch his mane or whatever, and then go back, and then we chatted. And and not paying attention to that what we thought found undesired behavior, door kicking. So basically we were punishing the door kicking by not giving him what he wanted. We were taking away something he wanted, attention. But at the same time, I said we have to pay really lot of attention about reinforcing desired behavior. And I can tell you, nothing is more difficult than praising a silent, obedient, good horse. Because we are chatting, we are reinforcing ourselves. Chat, chat, chat. We are having fun. And so then it was like, okay, let's go to the horse and give him attention. Within no time, his whole behavior has shifted. And even with his owner, who didn't really know about this, once we have tested it out, we told the owner, like, oh, this is what we have been doing, because she didn't believe in positive reinforcement whatsoever. Like, doesn't work, but she also didn't realize that she was positively reinforcing a horse to kick the doors and get stuck in the bars. So that was really interesting, and that happens all the time to us too. Like, every time I see an undesired behavior, I ask myself, how have I reinforced it, or how am I reinforcing it to keep it in the repertoire? Because sometimes it's something from their past, and sometimes we don't know. But the feedback is, oh, if I bite your finger, the treat will fall out. Okay, what can I do to reverse this thinking? Because I don't want you to bite my hand in order to get that treat, because no. But yeah, sometimes it's because they learned in the past, or so. Yeah, that's the principle. Like, always find, like, what can my horse be thinking? And the more you do that, the more educated guesses you do, the better you become at those educated guesses, because we will never exactly know what they are thinking, but their behavior will give us feedback about what they are thinking, because they will do what's being reinforced. If the behavior becomes useless and not be reinforced at all, they won't do it.
Um, I was also just gonna ask if you have any good tips. I mean, I Vision really loves doing it to where if I a lot of the time for kind of like the end of, or either like I'll do this for like the end of a session, or sometimes I'll do it if I want to like just take a quick break and then like reset. Because I'll usually, like, if I'm having to go clockwise and then I want to go counterclockwise, I'll usually kind of like go over to your bowl, have a couple treats to, and then we'll come back and go the other way. Um, but I also will kind of, for the end of the session, I'll usually just kind of give him, a little jackpot and its bowl, and then we'll be done or whatever. Um, but there've been a couple times where he won't even eat the treats out of his bowl because he doesn't want it to be over. Like, I'll go put him over there and he'll just stay at the cones, like, no, no, I'm not gonna stop. We're not, I want to keep playing. And I feel so bad because I'm like, oh buddy, I gotta go. Like, I can't play forever. But I was just like, I'm trying to think of any ways to, I mean, maybe I just need to give him like a more of a special treat, like maybe a little bit higher value treat to end it, or something in his bowl, so that he feels a little bit better about ending it. But he just really likes doing it. And so he doesn't want, sometimes he'll just like, he doesn't want to stop. He'll just wait, and he'll just like, he won't go to the bowl. He's like, no, we're going to keep playing. So I was like, oh, I need to figure out a way to make it better.
Several principles at work here. Like, I'm thinking, like, why is he doing that? Well, first of all, it can really be that choices and interaction and engaging with you is more reinforcing than the actual
Oh
treat,
yeah. No, I
especially
think
when
so.
he realizes, okay, this is the end treat, now you're gone.
Yeah, yeah, I think that definitely is it. I just am trying to think of a way to make it a little bit more. So maybe I just need to give him some more special high value treats when he ends, so
Well,
it feels a little more special.
let
But
me ask the question. What would happen if you could happen potentially if you end that with a very special treat?
I mean, he could feel conflicted because he wants a special treat and he wants to keep playing.
Yeah.
Um,
What else?
uh, he could be really excited to be done and want to go over to his bowl.
What else?
Uh, he could potentially just have more positive feelings about being done and knowing that when I leave, he gets a special treat, so he could feel
Yeah.
more happy about it.
What else? Agree. Keep going. What else? Like
Yeah.
there's so many things. But if I go through all these things, my what else is really really quick, and you make it a habit, you become predictable. Then, like what happens now can happen in a few weeks. Because the treat that you were giving him at first to end the session was also really special.
Hmm.
So if you replace that by even more special, when you become that predictable in the end, after X amount of time, and you do it specifically all the time, he will just decide, I'll leave that special treat and I'm going to entice you to keep going. So I think it could potentially postpone and then repeat the same behavior. I think maybe like find a way to end the session in a more natural way. Like what are you doing after training? How do you end that training, and what happens? Yeah, how does he
Well, it
show you that he
depends.
doesn't want to stop?
Well, it's usually not that he doesn't. Well, how does he show that he doesn't want to stop? He'll, well, like I said, there've been a few times when I've gone and I put the treats in there, and he'll just kind of stay by the cones and wait for me and like look at me and just be like, "No, let's keep playing." Um, or yeah, that's usually it. He'll just want to he'll stay over there. He'll kind of stay there and be kind of waiting for me and looking, or he'll, and kind of like being next to the cones. I mean, it really depends on the situation because sometimes what I do, a lot of time what I do or try to do, I just try to do shorter sessions and take little breaks in between so he's not getting, over aroused or anything. So sometimes I'll do a mini session with him, and then I'll switch over and do a mini session with Max, or I'll put the hay out or whatever, I'll take a break, do something, and then come back and do another mini session. Um, so it kind of depends on like what's going on, but the way it seems like he wants to keep doing it is that he'll wait by the cones for me, or he'll like stand, even if I put the cones away, sometimes he'll still just like stand where I in one of the areas where the cones were, and he'll like look at me, or he'll like nicker at me and whinny, like when I if I like look over at him, I'll be like, yeah, over here, come on. So
I can
yeah,
imagine that that would be so cute, and that
it's
you
very cute.
accidentally reinforce that in some way.
Oh yeah.
How
Well,
so
also
maybe
because
you have,
sometimes I have before been like, oh, he still really wants to go, like I'll keep doing it with him for a little bit, because on one hand I don't want to like I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing to reinforce, because I'm like, I do appreciate the feedback that like, oh, you really want to do it, and you're asking, like, you're initiating to play some more, and so I want to show you that you can get like wanting to play can be reward. I do want to I like that he's giving me feedback, and
yeah,
I want to show him that like, oh, I value like what you're asking for. Sometimes we can do that, like, but I also don't want it to be to where he gets frustrated if it ends. So I'm
yeah.
trying to figure out the
Do
balance.
you have like an end of session cue?
It's usually just that I go to a bowl and put like treats in the bowl or on the ground. So I'll either put them on the bowl, or if we're out in the field, I'll put like treats on the ground for him to eat.
Yeah. So what I have found, I, I, I so do understand like giving them like a jackpot for ending the session, which I'm really wondering, and it depends, not all horses, but for some horses, would it be like, um, yeah, do they realize it stops then? Do they think like what I did just before I got the jackpot, do I need to repeat that more? Or do they really, really realize it's over? Like what is
I
happening
also
in
usually
their
say,
head?
I'll say like all done. I usually do like this kind of
Yeah.
and say like all done.
So what I do is I usually don't even give well, now there with the two of them, I do leave some food to distract them, because otherwise they will
Yeah,
block me and it's like more, because they are just
exactly.
young and they kind of
Yeah.
start demanding. And what the only thing that I do is like repeating, end of session, 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 end of session. And I keep repeating that. And it took, like, in the beginning, really, really long time. Like, I had to repeat that like many, 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 many times. And now they're getting better. And I also have figured out when I say end of session and they don't want to believe me, I either walk out, and then kind of start petting them through the fence, which they're not really fond of. They're more like, yeah, where's the treat? I'm like, well, you remember end of session. And then they're like, okay. So I do something that they potentially not like or whatever, that they choose. Like, they can just step away, or I do something else that clearly, like, me getting the wheelbarrow to pick poop is a clear indication of, like, I will chat with you, no more treats. So
Yeah.
but
So maybe just
just,
be like more consistent with saying like all done.
I think in the end, I think when we would make our sessions every time in a way that they say, oh my God, enough, and that's too much. So we
Hmm.
actually do want to stop at a point where they still like it, where they still feel a
Right.
bit sad that it's ended, when they are still engaged. And I believe, and that's my personal experience, and also based on my history and what I've seen and done, is that if we can give them clarity and be really consequent about that, it's like, end of session. I really want to do anything else. Like, I will scratch you, I will give you attention because maybe you want still engagement. I can give you engagement. No more clicks and tweets. End of session means class is over. In my language that I try to teach them, class is over. So
Do you only do that at the end of, because here's something I've thought about. Do you only do that at the end? Do you do that between each mini session? Like if you do like multiple smaller sessions, do you
I
do it
do
between
that
each
at the
one?
end of each session. Why?
Okay.
Even if it's a mini session. Why? Because I want to practice it a lot, because it's a
Right.
difficult thing for horses. Like, suddenly clicks and treats are stopping, and
Yeah.
yeah. And we are the highlight of their day. The rest of their
Right.
environment is pretty much the same. There's not a lot of enrichment, and the training is so much enrichment. It's different every time. There's some predictability, but there's lots of novelty in there. They learn, they make choices. It's really, really highly enriching and reinforcing. So in between each session, I practice my end of training session,
Yeah.
and I only start the next session when I have really seen that my horse winded down emotionally, chose something to do, um, before I start a new session. And also, the new session will be announced um, with clarity. So they
I was gonna
never,
ask, what's your like start of session cue that you use? Because I what I usually do is I'll just come and I'll like give them a treat, like come talk to them and just hand them a treat from the pouch and then ask them to like come over or whatever. But I sometimes I don't know if I was curious, what do you use?
I don't really picked uh, a special thing. I do like to use their name because I want to that they pay attention to their name as well. But I
Hmm.
do think it's the environment that makes them guess. They always, like, if I'm walking towards the cones, it's like, "Woo!" you know.
Yeah.
And if they walk towards the cone and I didn't intend the session, I say, all gone, all gone, like, to
Yeah.
practice that. But I think the most important thing in end of session signals is to be very consequent, very clear, always do the same thing. And then it doesn't really matter if you say, like, food on the ground, all gone. But
Yeah.
when they follow you, like, are we done yet? Are we done? I'm going to the cones. You see that you respond, either ignore it or say, all gone, and then ignore it. All gone,
Yeah.
ignore it. That will, yeah, it will fade out. And then in between sessions, it's super important to make sure that they really unwind, pick a behavior they want to do that behavior, maybe another behavior, until you signal like, hey, let's start again. Otherwise, you say all gone, and the horse is like, I'm still in training mode. And then,
Hmm.
oh, I start staring at her, and then, oh, we are starting. And then you reinforce that, and they will never ever relax mentally.
Right.
So, like, I have a one on my YouTube video, the YouTube channel. There's a video where you can see it, and I also anticipate on the horse's behavior. So I was training with Kira. She came from the outdoor, live in Vancouver, where it's always raining in winter. So she was wet, and then we went to the indoor arena. So what did she want to do? She wanted to have a roll and dry up. I knew that, but I also wanted to train, and I also was in that at that moment a little bit like, I really want to be in control, so I will not kind of let you roll, but distract you by cueing you to do all kinds of behaviors, which she did, which was only for a short time, and I knew she was still wanting to roll. So that was really an important moment to cue the all gone, end of session signal, because I knew she had something so important on her mind. So she did roll, and that was a cue for me to just be around, like pretending to be, yeah, yeah, exploring the floor. Very interesting, ignoring her. And then she came to me, but then she wandered off again, and she had another roll and stuff like that. So that's also how one of the ways and situations where she learned, like, okay, end of training session, I can do whatever I want. In the outdoor arena in the summer, she wandered off to have some blackberry leaves. Like, I really wait until they were really into that, and then I'm kind of like, not like, we are starting again or you're missing out, but more
Hmm.
it's like, come on, Kira, let's go. And then, yeah, sometimes she needed to have another snack, or and sometimes she came, so that depends.
Yeah.
And I have seen where people didn't do that, and those horses got in really really high arousal, and they kept like, okay, end of session, but you know what, I will lay down. Oh yes, I triggered you to give me attention, a treat, or whatever engagement. And then they start doing that, all the extinction behaviors, doing more. So it's really important to be consequent about that. Say end of session, and before you start your second session or the next session, that they really mentally unwind, because if they don't, the end of session just doesn't mean anything, and it means like,
Right.
I'm missing out. keep keep at it, you're missing out, and then you
Right.
get that anxiety. So if you say end of session, like, train the other horse, like, I think your horses already know that, and then they do something uh, on their own, something they want
Right.
to do, and then only if they have done that for, like, I've trained llamas, and in the beginning, end of session, that he would just keep staring at me, and then I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, if you keep doing that, I will remove myself out of your paddock, because I really want to make it clear. End of session, nothing. So then in the beginning, I had to get out of sight. End of session, I moved, I disappeared. End of session,
Yeah.
I removed myself out of the paddock until the llama did something. And then eventually I could stay in his paddock and say end of session, and he had like a pause, a break,
Yeah.
and he wandered off to go do the washroom, to go to the washroom and stuff like that. And that was when I really knew, okay, he's mentally and physically so relaxed that he can go to the washroom, because if you're really excited, you can't.
Hmm.
I have
Okay,
to
cool.
pee, but no.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, I'll try to be more. I'll try to be more consistent too with my just like kind of verbal one that I use and stuff, because it's hard because it's so it's especially for Vision, because he's just historically so like, I think I told you, like, I got him, so he was rounded up from the wild because he's a Mustang, and then someone owned him for a year, but they neglected him. He had a collar, crusted onto his face, super underweight, and he's a very easy keeper. So like they were just being fed nothing. And then he was sent through auction, low end auction, and then I rescued him in Max, but someone else owned Vision for like over a year, and they didn't know how to train. I thought they did, or else I wouldn't have like let them take him. I wasn't planning on keeping him at first, but then I got him back. But they just made him worse. Like they made him so flighty, and they just reinforced his flight instinct. So I it's like anytime he's like choosing to engage, on one hand I'm like, oh, I want to reward this because it's so good, because he gets so like flighty and so worried about stuff, but I also want to give him clarity, so I'll just try to do that more.
Yeah, because it's good to, in the beginning, to do what you did, like, keep engaging and all that kind of stuff. But now you also have to realize that, um, yeah, you create a certain habit, and you're
Right.
not, you don't want to have that habit anymore, because you
Right.
do want to, for them to relax at the end of the session, and
Yep.
not have the feeling that they are missing out. And sometimes we have to be
Mm-hmm.
consequent, and like, yeah, you could say like, yeah, maybe it's even positive punishment. We are removing ourselves from the situation in order to decrease that behavior of like, I'm still on mentally, I'm on, I'm ready, I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes maybe they experience that as punishment, and I'm not a punishment trainer, but at the same time, if
Right.
we do it consequently, we also give them clarity. Yeah,
Right.
like, and it's like we cannot help if they they are sad when we stop training.
Right.
So yeah, that is the other side of the medal of like, yeah, making it a
Exactly.
win-win and engagement. And of course they don't want to stop. And if we do train that long that they need to stop, then we have
Right.
took it too far. So where is that line? And that can depend from day to day. But I think I'm convinced that even though we remove ourselves and we remove the training session and the learning opportunities and the clicks and the treats, if we give them clarity, it's like, oh, she said no. Okay, let's go. Let's
Right.
do something else that is reinforcing. Maybe rolling, maybe sniffing out, maybe look like for my horses. I'm like a kind of a sloppy trainer, because sometimes they
Same. Yeah, Vision does that too. He'll look around for the dropped ones afterwards.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's great. End of training. So they
Yeah.
know now, like, oh, and they have all this enrichment, and they can look there for treats and there and there and there, and they know
Yeah.
that. So that's why I keep them separated
Yep.
until I know the trained horse has covered up all the missed treats, so they don't get into a fight over that. So that's
Yeah.
my things. Your horses are a little bit more relaxed together. But yeah, so if you also know, like, okay, I have dropped some things, and you say all gone, that they know, they kind of, you give them permission. That's all, another way to look at it. But also maybe, hopefully, they look at it that, oh, it's permission to find all the lost treats.
Yeah. 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 That's a good point. I'll try to do that, and hopefully that helps them have some clarity. But yeah, thanks for answering all my questions today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, they are missing out, unfortunately, but there's a recording, so it will be all be good. And then
Mhm.
yeah, so after, I think this is week 6. Um,
So it's
so
homework
yeah,
for this week, just to keep practicing with the
yeah, and try to get some, like, focus on getting some. You can train one session for duration. Like,
mhm.
can he go around 4 cones for one click? And if that happens, jackpot. And also remember that then maybe you do lower your criteria a little bit, like, okay, we go back to 3 cones, 2 cones, but then go up. Like, if I say 6 cones, it's 1.5. But we have to remember not to go for, okay, click at each cone and then every cone and go higher in a straight line. But sometimes also like, okay, today was like, okay, just
Yeah, because
keep
he
like,
gets frustrated really easily if he which is why I've been going so slow, because he just gets I've been I he gets frustrated, and he starts to get like, I think he starts to lose clarity sometimes, or he feels like starts getting frustrated if he doesn't, if I try to increase, when I increase criteria, sometimes feel like I have to do it so slowly with him, or else he just starts getting really overwhelmed, like, and frustrated so fast. Like I feel like Max, my other horse, he's just like, oh yeah, I'll try something else, I'll go further, I'll do whatever. But Vision, if I change something, he's like, I don't know about, like, that's too much, that's more than I was doing. He gets so frustrated about it so easily.
Yeah,
So it's,
same for Fionn, but still, when he does it so right, I also do lower my criteria. Sometimes I just randomly
yeah,
click for one cone, and he's like, I did not expect that, and he doesn't even stop
yeah,
anymore at this point. But I'm really wanting this for exercise, so I don't want
right.
him to at this point, and I know it will be harder after I have this reinforcement schedule for a longer time, but for him at this point I just want him to benefit from, like, the cones means forward, 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 like,
Mhm.
um but I do I do occasionally, and then I have to block him, just here's your treat, just to remember
Yeah,
him. It's not always like in a straight line up, and because I want him to pay more attention and not like, I know
right.
what it is, this is it, the one trick pony, this is it, and then get frustrated if I reach my criteria, like, what's happening?
Exactly. Yeah, because he'll be like, no, I get. It's almost like, I mean, obviously this is me making stuff up, but it seems like he'll be like, no, well, I was getting clicked for like the cones, and so I know that I can raise it. Obviously, I have raised criteria, obviously from where we were, so obviously he can do it. It just feels like it has to get. He's so much slow. Like Max can be like, oh, I'll do multiple. Oh, whatever. I don't care. I'll try it. The Vision's like, no, like if you're gonna raise criteria, it's gonna be like I can do a couple more steps. That's all I can, like. Just it feels like he has to go so slow with it.
Yeah, and what
But
you
that's
can
okay.
do is also, like, if you, for instance, put the cones a little bit further away, and even,
Yeah,
like, yeah, just like a foot at a time, because that is
yeah,
already, and then raise your right rate of reinforcement for going
right.
around. Like, those are also things, like, and I think even for those horses, we have to have a certain amount of repetition, but also keep
Hmm.
moving the criteria so that they will
Yeah,
get used to it, and also going back for to the easier stuff sometimes,
right,
because otherwise
right,
it's like they keep running, because now Fionn is like, but only trot is reinforced, only trot. No, sometimes walk is
right,
reinforced, because I don't want him to go too crazy, because
right.
then you don't reinforce, and then you get like extinction learning, like he wants to do more, 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 and then he gets the
Right.
click, and it's so that I that's the part of keys to success for trainers, the principles of that emotions. Is he in extinction learning? Is he getting towards frustration, towards extinction? Like, and how can we see that? And what's the feedback? But
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah,
Cool.
and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because that's the feedback. Okay, this was too much for Vision. Max can handle it. Vision cannot. But also, um, it's really good to realize that he is that way, but sometimes because we are reacting to their feedback, the pitfall is that we don't move on,
Yeah. I
because
know that
we are
I've done that in the
afraid that
past.
we
Yeah.
we make them like
I don't want to make him
frustrated.
frustrated. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, and I do think that if you see one time that he moves, like if your cones are a little bit further away, maybe train that a few sessions, and then really click at one and be ready at the first. I do think that you can create already a trot. If that happens, I would really jackpot him.
Yeah. I haven't seen
Stay
a
a
trot
long
yet.
time
I've seen
with
a
him
little
with,
bit of
and
faster walking, but
oh yeah, and then
yeah.
and then if he trots, jackpot him, stay with him for a long time for engagement and other things that
Yeah.
he would love, and then do give him a break, because he needs to mentally, um yeah, let's sink in
Process.
what real process, yeah, that's the word, thank you,
Mm.
yeah. So he, when they really process it, they can't wait to start again, and they probably like, trot is the new walk, right?
I know. I'm hoping for the trot because we're at the point where I can click at one cone and feed at the next. no, go to the next cone. But he's such a, I mean, I know we'll get trot someday. I just keep he's he just hasn't really shown very much speed, but he just never he doesn't move very like he's a walker. That's what he like just in general, he doesn't trot very often, so it's I haven't seen
So
it yet,
you
but
do have to look at the distance between the cones, because
okay.
if they are too short, like some horses really need to speed up like 4, 5, 6
Okay.
steps, and they don't go from walk trot. Like
Right.
I
Okay.
have one horse that does that, but my previous horse Kira, she was like walk, 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 trot.
Okay. That's good to know. Okay.
So if you realize that vision maybe needs 6 meters to make that transition, set
Right.
up it in a way, try it out, and see what happens. And maybe
Yeah.
you do the corner cones a little bit more distance, and maybe you need to put a cone in the middle of the long side just to give him clarity about where he's going to go, and then hopefully
Okay.
between cone 1 and 2 on the long side he speeds up.
Okay.
And then if you don't click and click between, like, the middle cone on the long side and the corner, then maybe he has a little trot. If that happens, really jackpot him, give him a break, process it, and then see what happens before you fade out that cone. But if he
Okay.
needs that distance to make that transition, you have to provide that with him, because in a small square it will never happen.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Cool.
And
Well, thanks again.
feed for position to the outside, because otherwise he will come inside. But even if you have like a smaller rectangle and you feed really to the outside, they will make the bends more roomy, and maybe he will offer, even though if he needs more distance to create that transition, he will take that, because he's not afraid to go to the outside of the cone, because that's still
Right.
reinforced.
Okay.
There's so many
Perfect. I'll
I could take
practice.
for. I can keep going and going, but thank you very much. And
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, send in a video, tag me, and you can do 2 videos or
Okay.
3 if you're doing if you see that there's a lot of progress, or if you have a question, but keep them like 3-minute max, because
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Sounds good.
thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.